The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Thank you so much, TJ, for joining us. So we'll go and start things off with tell us what NEO Spotlight is.
So NEO Spotlight is what's referred to as an NCAA scouting service. Long story short, college coaches from across the country, whether it's Division I, Division II, all the way down to the NAI level, are able to subscribe, and more or less they're paying me to be out on the road. I am like an extension of their staff, so to speak. A lot of coaches at the scholarship level, they all have a calendar in terms of when they're allowed to be out, when they're not allowed to be out. They have a certain amount of hours that they're able to, be on the road and log with recruits. Whereas me, I have no restrictions at all. So I'm able to cover as many games as I like, as often as I would like to. So it serves as a pretty useful and resourceful tool for them and helping them in the process of identifying potential recruits and just kind of make their job easier for when the spring and the summer, when the majority of their recruiting takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. That is awesome. So that kind of piggybacks me onto the next question of, as the founder, what kind of gave you this idea? Did someone kind of approach you with an idea like this? Or was it just like the light bulb clicked and you're like, this is genius, and it got rolling from there?
Yeah, it's funny. So my whole life, man, I've always known that I wanted to be involved with basketball in some capacity, whether it was playing, coaching, commentating, scouting. Like I didn't care. My whole goal was to be around the game that I love, meet people through the game, and most importantly, help people through the game of basketball. So once I got out of college, I was playing in a pro-am basketball league, which was a league for adults that had, some high school kids, like elite high school kids played, current college guys, former college guys, overseas guys. We occasionally even had like some NBA guys come through and play with us. So I saw this guy who was there every week, and he was filming and recording all the games. So I looked into it. His YouTube channel is called Third Coast Hoops. So he had, built a lot of credibility and a reputation in Ohio by recording high school basketball games, specifically in the Cleveland area. So, I went to his website and I saw just like a bunch of videos, but I didn't see like any writing or any recaps or like top performers, things like that. So I reached out to him and said, hey, man, like I just got done with college. I'm an English major. I love basketball. I'd love to, figure out a way to help you out in some capacity. So me and him together, I believe it was 2015 was my first year. Mind you, I'm driving from Canton to Cleveland. For those of you who aren't familiar with Ohio, it was about an hour drive there and back. So I'm driving an hour every Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, going to different games. He's filming, I'm doing the writing, and together we were putting out a lot of content and a lot of information. And because of that, a lot of college coaches, began to follow me on Twitter and reach out to me. Hey, what do you think about this kid? Or, what are your thoughts on these two guys? And I'm just giving all this information out for free. I'm young. I'm excited. I'm like, hey, I'm doing what I said I wanted to do, right? While I'm not getting paid for it, Steve, who's the owner of Third Coast Hoops, wasn't getting paid much at the time either. But I was able, through him and by him opening that door for me and giving me just this young kid out of college a chance, I was able to build a lot of rapport with high school coaches and college coaches. And that led me to starting NEO Spotlight. So I knew that there were guys who were high school scouts and worked for colleges, but I wasn't quite sure of the process or what that all entailed or how you had to go about doing it. I just took a chance and bet on myself. And, here I am, 8, 9 years later. I work with over 75 schools across the country, and I get paid to watch basketball and do exactly what I said I wanted to do. So it's very fortunate.
Carved your own path and are living the dream right now as well. Even before betting was legal in Ohio, you bet on yourself and made the most of it. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's so cool. Now, you mentioned the scouting, the evaluation, that sort of thing. So I just kind of want to note as what kind of goes into that as well, too, because you are one person as far as I know, and you can't be 7 people at 7 places at once. So right. What kind of goes into the scouting, the evaluations when you watch them? Like, do you ever worry maybe just catch somebody on a hot night where they score 50, then the rest of their time they're scoring 8 or 9, or what kind of goes into those evaluations and scoutings when you're watching?
So that's a great question. There are a lot of guys who refer to themselves as like national scouts, guys who travel to different events across the country and just kind of watch all of the top players. And as cool as I think that is, I think it is almost virtually impossible to consider yourself a national scout just because you're spreading yourself so far thin. So what I do during the high school season is I cover Ohio. So I cover Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, everywhere in between from November to March. And then April, June, July, I travel. I might go watch some Indiana teams, Michigan teams and things like that. But I feel like my goal, my whole goal and always was to know Ohio inside out better than anybody else. So the reason why I say that is to answer your question, I have a rule of thumb where I like to, if possible, watch a kid 3 times. I want to see a good game, I want to see a bad game, and I want to see an average game. And between those 3 evaluations, whether they be in high school, AAU, summer ball, a combination of the 3, I think that gives you a pretty genuine, pretty good idea of where a kid is at. But yeah, that's how I do it. I want to see a kid 3 times, and it's important to see kids in multiple settings because high school and AAU are 2 completely different evaluations as far as I'm concerned. With AAU, they're playing with more talented kids against more, I guess, college size, college level athleticism. When I'm watching an AAU game, like a high level AAU game, there's the 10 guys on the floor are all going to play college basketball at some level. So when you're surrounded by good players, you get an idea of what your natural role is. Because not everybody's going to be the guy, when the shot clock's running down, or, not everybody's going to be that guy averaging 18, 20 points a game. So when you're surrounded by a bunch of other dudes, you quickly find out who you are and what you can do. So I look at AAU evaluations in terms of what's a guy's role, right? Can he play with other good players? And then high school, it allows you to see a kid more so with like a magnifying glass, right? With this high school team, he's going to have the ball a little bit more. He's going to more times than not be the best player. You get to really see how coachable a kid is, how they interact with their teammates. Can they lead? How they respond when things aren't going their way. So to me, I think the perfect blend is to see kids in multiple settings. And what also helps me too is I watch these kids from a young age. A lot of the top prospects get identified between their freshman and sophomore year. More times than not, the top kids as freshmen and sophomores typically end up being, still towards the top or at the top by the time they're juniors and seniors. So I get a chance to see how much a kid has grown throughout the course of his high school career. I get to see what kind of trajectory he's on, how much his body has changed. And that's another reason why I like to just narrow in and know my state inside out better than anybody else versus, trying to spread myself to 3-4 different states. And you kind of miss some of those little nuances and relationships and insider information that you get by really focusing on your coverage area.
100% as well. That's so cool. You get to see basically from 1 to 100, you get to see them all the way through. But that I kind of want to circle back to the AAU thing you mentioned as well too. Some players, like everyone comes in there and is that dude, you're already the big fish, but then you're surrounded by big fish and everyone kind of falls into, for lack of better terms, where they would be at a college level. When they're in that situation, how often do you see guys that come in? It's like, oh, this is top 5 prospect in the state, but then in AAU they end up kind of falling into almost, I don't want to say role player because that sounds rude, but you know what I mean? Like they kind of have trouble falling into that role because they're so used to being it. And maybe it affects them playing at the next level. Like a big name guy ends up going to a smaller school because they see when he's surrounded by dudes, he doesn't quite fit in necessarily.
Yeah, that happens all the time, especially here in Ohio. Ohio, we're more so like a low major to mid-major state in terms of like the talent we have. At football, I think you'd be hard-pressed to name 10 better states in the country than Ohio as far as football goes. Ohio, I believe, is the 7th most populated state in the country, but we push and we tend to steer our top athletes towards football. And as a result of that, basketball takes somewhat of a hit. Whereas, I'd say on average, we get maybe 3 to 5 kids per grade that are legitimate high major players. So the majority of our guys are mid-major, low-major guys, or they're role players at that level. And sometimes when you watch just Ohio and only Ohio, you kind of put yourself in a bubble. You don't get to see what else is out there. So thankfully, when you go to AAU every year, AAU takes place in April, usually about the first half of May. It takes a break in June and then comes back in July. So it's about 2.5 to 3 months, but it gives you that perspective of where exactly our guys are in terms of talent and how we stack up versus the rest of the country. But yeah, there are quite a few states that, I would say absolutely trump us in terms of talent. But the brand of basketball that we play in Ohio is almost second to none. A lot of the times during the high school season, you get some of these teams from Florida or North Carolina or Georgia come up here. And mind you, I mean, they have a lot of talent. Physically, they're just long and athletic and strong. Sometimes it looks like a varsity team versus a JV team, but we play such a good brand of basketball that a lot of other states aren't accustomed to seeing, that we're able to win a lot of games that on paper we really have no business winning.
Yeah, absolutely. That I kind of want to also add on to that because that was a very interesting point you brought up too. How often do you see players maybe that are because they play the good brand of basketball in those situations, a coach will see that like, oh, okay, he may not be 6'7" and run a 4.3 and be dunking with his elbows, but we see how he moves, plays defense, and that sort of thing too. How many times do you see maybe some players almost get up scouted, I guess, if you will, like they almost get higher offers than you would initially think just because of the way they play, because the coach is like, all right, I don't have to teach him to play basketball here. He knows how to play.
Absolutely. That's a very undervalued aspect of scouting and evaluating young talent is I take into account how has this kid been coached, right? Because 9 times out of 10, when a high school kid goes to the collegiate level, physically you're going to be behind the curve, right? Those guys are going to be bigger than you, stronger than you, especially with the NCAA adding that 5th year because of COVID. Those guys are starting to phase out. I believe this is the last year. Current seniors are the last guys in college to get that 5th year. But more times than not, you're coming into college physically behind the curve. You can't also be coming into college mentally behind the curve as well. So when I was young and first starting out, obviously you get excited by, the crossovers and the dunks and, how athletic a guy is, right? That's what, a lot of the highlight tapes and Instagram and YouTube videos promote and they push, right? So a lot of casual people or, I guess people who are outside of the realm of scouting and evaluating, we get caught up in that, right? But the longer you do it, the more you appreciate just guys who know how to play. And very, very rarely, like, do I find kids that genuinely have just a natural feel and a basketball IQ, and they understand when to dribble, when to pass, when to shoot. And I think I was having this conversation with a few people the other day. I saw a percentage on Twitter. It said like 30% of the league right in the NBA right now is, European players or overseas guys, and they expect in about 10 to 15 years that number is going to be closer to 50%. And I think that's a result of just simply guys in the United States not knowing how to play basketball. So for me, that's something I extremely value. Is one, first thing I look for is, does he play hard? Because as crazy as it sounds, is having a high motor and a kid who competes and values every possession, that's become a skill, because it's hard to find kids who just flat out compete and are tough. So one, does he play hard? Two, does he know how to play? And a big thing that I personally look for and I put a lot of value in is, what else does this kid do besides score the basketball? How does he impact the game when the ball is not going through the hoop? So that's extremely important, just simply knowing how to play basketball.
I can't remember who said the quote I think it was a few months ago. Someone's like 30% of the NBA doesn't even like basketball. They're just tall and can run or something like that too. And that's kind of how you get there, is you don't you basically grew up watching the And One mixtapes, and suddenly you realize you could do that, and it gets you that far. But the kids who know how to play, like you mentioned, they're the ones who end up winning championships and going far, or getting college paid for, even if they don't make it to the next level. So that's really good to hear people talk about that, because I'm a sucker for a well set pick. So, or a well set pick, or a good quality roll, or good spacing. So that's awesome to hear that.
You'd be shocked at just how many kids that don't even know how to set a proper ball screen.
I can only imagine too, like the flailing knees and the flailing elbows, unable to set like it.
Guards that don't play with pace, right? They don't allow the big to get set, so then it becomes a moving screen. It's a very simple game that we've somehow made a lot more difficult than it needs to be.
Exactly. It's turned simple addition into rocket science when it could really be solved with 2+2. It's funny how that is, but
Absolutely.
I want to circle too. I do see that you do some like seminars and sit downs with coaches and teams too. So tell me a little bit about what goes into those. Like, what do those usually entail?
So during COVID, right? Obviously, that was a weird time for everybody. One thing that I found the most interesting about the pandemic was, regardless of what field of work you were in, where you were at in life, how much money you had, how much money you didn't have, once COVID hit, we were all in the same spot, right? And we were all trying to figure it out, not sure where things were going. So during this time, there were a lot of things going on and transpiring with the NCAA. So, for example, kids who graduated high school in 2020 and went on to college, they all got a free year of college. So anybody that was in college during that, I believe it was the 2019-2020 college season, they all four of those grades, right? Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, got a free year, right? Got an additional year. So if you were a senior, let's say at Ohio State at that time, you could come back as a fifth year and still be a senior. Because a lot of conferences said, hey, we're not playing. Some conferences opted to play anyway. So a lot of people were confused. Hey, how is this going to affect high school players in recruitment? And then you throw in the NCAA transfer portal, right? And the trickle down effect that has had. So it took some adjustment from me to figure out exactly, okay, how valuable am I right now is a scouting service when a lot of coaches are, kind of transitioning to the transfer portal. So it took some time for me to figure out where things were at. So, and this is something I do on a daily basis. I talk to dozens of college coaches throughout the week. So if I was playing catch up, I couldn't imagine where a lot of these student athletes and parents were at. So because of that, I started doing recruiting seminars across Ohio, where I travel to high schools and I speak with parents, student athletes, coaching staffs, and just kind of give them an idea of the current recruiting landscape, where things are headed, what they can do to best prepare themselves and put themselves in the best situation in order to be recruited at the next level. So.
Yeah, awesome. Which I have to ask, it's probably unlikely, but I'm curious. Have you ever had a coach or a player basically try and talk back to you, get snippy with you, or like go a la Cruz from Coach Carter and just try and snap back or anything like that? Have you ever had anyone try and get lippy or anything like that with you?
No, very like, all right, I'm trying to think of how to say this. So I always tell people not to ask questions that you're not prepared to hear the answer, right? Because if you ask me something, the only thing as TJ Peatross know how to do is give you my honest opinion. It might be what you want to hear. It might not be what you want to hear, but at least you're going to know that I gave you my honest to God opinion. So sometimes when people ask me, hey, whether it's a high school coach, hey, what do you think about my kid? Or a parent says, hey, what level, do you think my kid is? Then, sometimes there's some pushback. Someone told me one time, and this always resonated with me, that high school coaches think their players are one level better than they are, and their dads think they're two levels better than what they are. So naturally, people have these very high expectations of where they think their kid can play. So yeah, there's a little pushback there. But I try to keep a lot of my opinions, as far as that goes, private, and with the college coaches that I work for. I've learned the hard way that giving those type of assessments and evaluations to high school coaches or parents, it tends to not go well, just because I just don't think I think where their expectations are and where reality is are a country mile apart.
Every single time. And then the athletes on top of that too. Even when I was a high school athlete and was an okay one, I thought I was going D1 when that was definitely not the case, and no one was going to tell me otherwise. So I can only imagine as the parent on top of it. So
Yeah, and social media has had such a huge impact on the world of high school basketball, and it has forced the college coaches to adjust as well. So do you remember when kids were in high school and you would get letters in the mail, whether it was from like Ohio State or Dayton or Akron or whoever it was, right? And we all knew deep down those letters didn't mean a whole lot, but they were still pretty cool to get, right? Like, hey, my buddy's probably not going to end up at Ohio State, but the fact that they sent him this letter when he was a freshman or a sophomore is pretty cool. So scholarship offers have almost become like the new letters. You see a lot of kids get offered as freshmen, sophomores, and majority of the time those offers aren't even real. They're college coaches who are trying to appease AAU coaches, or hey, like, give you an example. There's a kid who got an offer recently, and when I reached out to the college coach, he told me, hey, I've never even seen the kid play. So the only reason I offered him, my buddy is the head coach at that high school. So I wanted to offer his guy and just kind of do him a solid. So what happens is you see these parents and kids see their peers getting offers, right? Scholarship offers on Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. And then it becomes a measuring stick. And everyone is just kind of chasing after this attention and this validation, when majority of the time it's just not even genuine. So yeah, social media has had more of a negative impact than positive impact, I would say, on just not only our society in general, but just the way things move and operate within what I do.
absolutely. I think I still have one or two of those letters from when I was a kid too. It's like, I'm definitely not going. You just saw me like one of the summer camps and just threw that at me. But I still like that letter, even though I knew it was kind of empty. If it's an actual scholarship and that would have happened, I would have pouted for a very long time. So I can't even imagine what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just interesting to see where things are going, man. And just quite frankly, basketball culture, especially high school basketball in the United States, is just not in a great place right now. I think it's going to take a hard reset and just a drastic change of the way we do things at the youth level to get things back on track and where they need to be.
Absolutely. And you mentioned social media and a drastic change. So that's a good segue into our next topic. So a couple of weeks ago, me and my co-host talked to the founder of the Players NIL, and we were talking with him, he mentioned how NIL is actually really starting at the high school level for a lot of these kids too. Not necessarily the pay-to-play ones, but the ones who maybe talk with like a local business and then post on social media, that sort of thing too. Is that something that you've kind of encountered when speaking with athletes, when talking with scouting, or how's that kind of changed since you started to where we're at now?
So here in Ohio, student athletes are not prohibited to receive NIL in Ohio. I believe Pennsylvania, they are. There are a few bordering states where it is allowed, but currently in Ohio, it is not. But I would say the kids who are really benefiting from NIL at the high school level are like the 1%ers. Mm-hmm. It's not gotten to a point, I'm not sure it will, where you see the majority of kids benefiting from that. And it's interesting. I think the whole NIL conversation, it's like Pandora's box. To me, it was like once you opened it, there's really no going back.
It's the wild, wild west now.
Oh, it's insane. And you see a lot of these schools, giving out these big bags of money to kids, or, promising. I just heard a story about a high major kid in the SEC who plays basketball, who was promised, I believe, like $400,000 to transfer there. And he's only received like $150,000 of it. And, that kid's already used his one-time transfer, so it's not like he can leave again. But yeah, I think that the clock is running out on NIL. I'm just not sure what the ROI is to, these schools and these alumni who are paying out these big sums of money and not winning conference championships and finishing the season with losing records. I think that the well for the vast majority is going to dry, and it's going to dry sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I wish if they need someone to donate that money, they can send it my way as well. But we'll circle back now. We'll circle back on track now. So when I covered sports for a little bit too, the one thing that was always interesting about high school sports is like championships and playoffs. They all go on at almost the exact same time, basically. Like there's Division 1, 1A, 2A, 3A. All of them go on at the same time. When I was in Montana, they all went on at the same time. So we had to drive like a country mile just to go between them as well. How do you kind of balance going to all of those playoff games going on at the same time, often in different areas too?
Man, that's a good question. So I believe the tournament draw in Ohio is this Sunday. So by Sunday afternoon and evening, we should get all the district tournaments. So in Ohio, it goes from the district tournament to the regional tournament and then to the state tournament. We have 4 divisions, Division 1 through 4. Division 1 is our biggest, right? Those are a lot of the big schools that have 1,500, 2,000 kids. Division 4, the much smaller private or just kind of rural schools. So I've always tried to get the most bang for my buck. So it's weird. So Ohio is split up into different regions, right? You have the Northeast region, the Central region, the East, the Southeast, the Northwest, and the Southwest. So they all come together at the end, right, for the state tournament. But during the district and the regional process, it's almost like each part of the state kind of does their own thing. So, for example, in Columbus, so the Central Ohio region, they do all of their Division 1 district final games in one gym on the same day. So I can go down there and I can see, the 8 best Division 1 teams in Columbus on a Saturday afternoon. Whereas in Northeast Ohio, it's the biggest region. So instead of there being 4 districts, there are 6 districts in Northeast Ohio Division 1. And for whatever reason, we put all 6 of those districts, they play their district finals games in different places. So to me, it makes no sense, right, to stay up here and, drive 45 minutes, from game to game and maybe only see 2 or 3 games when I can go to Central Ohio and see 4 games and not have to move my butt. And then Sunday, drive to Cincinnati and see all of their Division 1 district final games on the same day as well. So I try to map it out in a way that allows me to see the most potential prospects as possible. But like you said, when the tournament's going on, especially for me, it's tough because especially the kids who are seniors, if they lose, I don't see them again. Right. And it's not like they get to move on and go play AAU again. Some, very few kids do. Like if you're an unsigned available senior, sometimes they'll play AAU in the spring. But more times than not, when a kid plays that last high school game as a senior, I don't see him play again until he's in college. So I try to prioritize, okay, who has a chance to lose? Who do I need to see? Can I see them before they possibly get eliminated from the tournament? But yeah, it is difficult and it's a lot to juggle. But yeah, I try to map it out in a way that allows me to see the most games and maximize my time.
The fun synopsis of the job is just get to watch basketball, and that's it as a job. But there's a lot more that goes into it. The behind the scenes is it's a conspiracy theory board in the background with 7 different things.
Oh, people have no idea, just like the puzzle you have to put together in your head. So I live in Cleveland, but I cover the whole state. So I guess the strategy I use is Monday through Thursday, I try to stick to Northeast Ohio. Unless there's like a really big game up here on a Friday night, then I'll stay. But I typically try to use Friday and Saturday and even Sundays as a way to travel to those other areas of the state and catch multiple games, and then come back home. But yeah, it's a puzzle. Just trying to figure out, okay, which teams am I going to see here at this event? Which teams, and do I have to take a Tuesday night out of my schedule and go see? Otherwise, I might not see them again. It requires a lot of organization, a lot of communication, and a lot of relationship building. behind the scenes. It's certainly more than, just going to games and watching basketball, even though none of it, if I'm being honest, feels like work. I get paid to talk baskalball. I don't know if it gets much better than that.
Exactly. There's always a light, even on the rainiest days. There's that light at the end of the tunnel. There's always the positive too. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Speaking of basketball too, and speaking of driving, I do see you have a podcast, your own Drive to Dayton podcast. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the Drive to Dayton podcast is a show that me, Kurt Stubbs, and Mike Roth all started about midway through last year. So the Ohio State tournament got moved from Columbus to Dayton. So we wanted to just kind of do a show that led up to the state tournament. So kind of like a weekly show to keep fans and just all the other basketball junkies like us informed on, which teams were playing well at what times, and which kids have been standing out. What are the top games of the week that they should go watch? So for what started, I thought it was just going to be a temporary thing. I'm thinking, hey, we'll just do this for a few shows, lead up to the tournament, and then we'll be done. But we don't have a huge fan base, I wouldn't say, but we have a core probably 200 to 300 people that listen to us every week, and we were getting bombarded, dude. Like right before the season started, they were like, "Hey, are you guys doing the show again? Like, when are you guys starting the show?" So then we all got together and was like, "Hey, man, let's keep the ball rolling." And it's fun. We just hop on a Zoom call every Monday, and we just shoot the crap, man, for 90 minutes about what we saw that week and where we're going next and who's playing well, and it's fun. It also makes me feel a little more normal. To see, to talk with two guys who are equally as obsessed with Ohio basketball as I am. So it definitely keeps me from going crazy more times than not.
Absolutely. That's so cool. That's awesome. And now we'll get into some of the more fun things as well, too. You mentioned you're driving all over the state for work as well, too. And when I moved to Ohio and Cleveland, the first thing I noticed was, wow, the food here is actually surprisingly good. Like, I was surprised at how diversified the food was. There's a lot of really good options here. Tell me a little about some of your food adventures driving all over Ohio as well, too. Some of the good places you've gone, things that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that's the cool thing about that. Obviously, I've been a food guy. Like, I've always loved to eat, but I wouldn't say I had like a passion for food or someone who was really willing to, step out of the box and try different things all the time. But when you're traveling, right, you're in Toledo this weekend or Columbus this weekend, right? You don't have your same go-to spots that you do when you're at home. So, I start reaching out to high school coaches and other media guys. I'm like, hey, man, where should I go eat? And, I started posting different places on, Twitter and Instagram, specifically small businesses I like to try and support, help build awareness. But yeah, it's fun, man. You start to, build a list in your phone. I had probably like 200 or 300 different places in Ohio. And I've quickly kind of become like the food guy. So like when college coaches are in town or they're going to a game in Columbus, they're like, hey, man, I'm at this high school. Where should I go eat around here? So that's been a cool part of it too, man. It's just kind of expanding my palate, stepping out of my comfort zone, and just being able to just kind of help other people find new places that they love. I think that's like one of the coolest things is it's like similar to music, right? You send a buddy an album or a song that you like, and a few days later, they're like, man, I love this album, or man, I love this song. Thanks for putting me onto it. To me, I get that same feeling with restaurants. When I tell people about places and they go check it out and, they get back to me that they loved it or, they send me a picture of it. So to me, it's just all about building relationships, building relationships through basketball, building relationships through food. And that's just the best part of it, man. You get into it because you love basketball, and you quickly realize that you love the people in basketball just as much as you love actually watching the sport. So, yeah, the restaurants and the food tours and stuff like that it was kind of like a bonus. It just kind of happened organically. It wasn't something that I really planned for, but it's fun. I like when people reach out to me for food recommendations here. So.
Absolutely. That's so cool. It's always about the people. I think every person that we've interviewed on the cast, every way, one way or the other, always comes back to the people you're around is always a big thing as well.
Always does.
The activity may be fun, but it's made great by the people you're around too. Like it could be a great activity, but if you're surrounded by heathens and hooligans, it's not quite the same. So I have one quick one for the ones in Northeast Ohio will understand this one. Barrio, good, bad, awful.
Oh man, so
decent. I'll accept. We'll throw in decent there, like Taco Bell level too.
Also, by the way, guys, no Taco Bell slander will be allowed. Taco Bell, right, to me is like obviously it's not a daily, weekly thing, but like once a month or like 12:30 at night, you're tired, you're on your way home, you see that bell lit up on the side of the road. That's a good feeling to me, man. Like, 'cause it's dependable. You know it's going to be open. You eat it right before you go to sleep, so that way you don't got to deal with the repercussions of it until you wake up. But Barrio is good. I mean, it's not great. I think I will say it drives me nuts when people come up here and they say, "Oh, someone recommended that I go to Barrio," and I'm just like, "My God, man, there are so many just like dive bars or taco trucks or hole in the wall spots where you're just going to get just so much better food and at a better price more times than not." But Barrio is good. I definitely would say slightly overhyped, but not bad. I mean, Barrio to me is almost more like a social thing. Yeah. So it's nice to go there after a Cavs game or a Browns game or something and just kind of mingle. But yeah, if I'm recommending somebody to go get some tacos, I am 1,000% not sending them to Barrio. That's not my first choice.
Same scenario as well too. It's a place that mostly locals should have because it's not somewhere that a visitor should have, that sort of thing as well too.
Absolutely,
it's plenty good, plenty fine, but like that, there's a list to get through first. Like we'll start with La Plaza and work our way back from there.
Oh my God, La Plaza is phenomenal. I just recently moved to Lakewood. There's a spot right down the road from me called Cilantro. High level. I'm embarrassed to tell you guys how many times I've DoorDash from there. But yeah, it's just such a long list, like you mentioned, of places that you must go before you dare step foot into Barrio.
Exactly. It's like In-N-Out in California a little bit, just a little bit less, a little bit overhyped as well too. But I digress. California, don't hate me. I live there. I understand. But I just want to check in, see if there's anything else you wanted to touch base on or anything we wanted to circle or mention really quickly that we might not have talked about already.
No, I appreciate you having me on, DJ. Is definitely nice to kind of shed somewhat of a light onto the world of high school basketball scouting. Obviously we weren't able to go into too much, detail and, some of the nuances. But it's cool to give people just kind of an inside look, so to speak, into what I do and what all it entails. And there are people who probably aren't even familiar with scouting services or didn't know that they existed or how they work. So it's definitely always cool to bring awareness and, maybe you spark someone up who, is going to games on Tuesday and Friday nights just because they love it. And maybe it turns into a hobby or, a side hustle for them as well. So I think that's the cool thing is just watching like other media platforms come in and slowly build themselves up as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If you start it up yourself is almost better than taking the traditional path these days as well. And it's shown across the way as well. And that's not even a shot at traditional ways. It's just there's more options for more people this way too. So before we let you out here, go and give you a chance, go and let everyone know where to find you, both the podcast and NEO Spotlight.
So you can find NEO Spotlight on Twitter at NEO_Spotlight for all your updates on Ohio high school basketball. You can follow the Drive to Dayton podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you listen to your weekly shows. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and watching. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. My DMs are open. May not get back to you right away, but I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. So.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, TJ. We greatly appreciate the time as well, too. And best of luck with the upcoming season as well, too. And hopefully the drives are not too hectic or anything like that. And hopefully the weather cooperates.
Yeah, I think we're past the brunt of it. It was like 50 degrees today by the time I went outside. So can't be too mad about that. I think we're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in Northeast Ohio. So
knocking on wood that it stays that same way as well too. Well, thank you so much. We do greatly appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Good luck, and thanks for having me.